Before we begin this evening's address, make sure that you're subscribed to this channel, and if you already have subscribed, make sure to double check. Seems with every video we get more and more people who've been saying, I didn't even know that I was unsubscribed. No wonder I haven't known that your videos have been posting lately. Don't let that be you. And also, make sure to share on social media, give the video a like. The support that you do give to the video to help raise its notoriety does help it to reach more people. Now, that said, let me ask you a question. When is a virus more than a virus? Here's a better question. When is a virus not a virus? Well, when someone from the dominant society gets it. See, as long as coronavirus was something that was mostly over there with the would-be honorary white supremacists in China, well, it was basically a yellow disease, and of course it immediately hopped to the Europeans, and now it's over here in the United States. But of course it's mostly a Chinese disease, and we'll blame the Chinese for it. The rightness or wrongness of that position is not really germane to this evening's video essay. But now we find out that Tom Hanks and his wife have gotten tested and they are positive for the coronavirus. Positive indeed. But given some of the things that we've been discussing just today on Twitter, for example, about Mr. Hanks and his associations with certain blackface performers, and of course his son Chet, or as I like to call him, piece of Chet Hanks, who likes to run around using the N-word and telling everybody it's his freedom of speech, you see a pattern forming. And that being the case, is it really the coronavirus, or should we call it the karma virus? I'm asking for a friend. And it is a fair question, by the way, because Tom Hanks has had associations with certain blackface performers, and this at a point where you can't pretend that, oh, he was just a product of his time. I was waiting for the idiots in the peanut gallery to try that one. And his son Chet's a hell of a lot bolder, and that being the case, this gives us a window into how it is that Tom Hanks has been raising his kids and what he's been teaching them to believe in the Hanks family values. Yeah, piece of Chet Hanks, he loves throwing around the N-word. Well, now the little bastard has a new N-word that he can become acquainted with. Novel coronavirus. And as for Tom Hanks, well, folks, you know that Tom Hanks is 63 years old. I mean, you do know that, right? The man's damn near a senior citizen at this point. And being over 60, he is in the prime window of people who, when you get it, you become much more susceptible to the more severe consequences of this particular virus. People in his age range, that's when the virus starts to become lethal for people in that age range. Not saying that I'm wishing anything on Mr. Hanks, but I do think it's fair to say that if the actuarial tables remain consistent, well, Tom Hanks' next movie role might have to be a remake of Weekend at Bernie's. That might be the next movie Tom Hanks is starring in if the coronavirus remains true to the age range that it's most detrimental to. And now Tom Hanks, in his final movie role, Weekend at Bernie's Part 2. And you can already hear the critics now. They would already be thinking of ways to praise it and say, yes, yeah, we know that Tom Hanks assumed room temperature, but he was so compelling nonetheless, just so compelling. Even as a cadaver, he was just the most empathetic cadaver that you ever saw. Just amazing, just amazing. But I digress. And before you get ready to decide that maybe Tom Hanks ain't as bad as all that, you do know that the man's an actor, don't you? And he spent the better part of the last 30 years, once he turned away from doing comedy and decided to become a dramatic actor, he spent the last 30 years basically pretending to be the most earnest and modest and forthright man. He's been putting on a performance, and a lot of you have bought into it. You seem to have forgotten that he's an actor. And like most actors, he's just pretending. It's not his job to be pious. It's not his job to be modest. It's not his job to be empathetic with people. It's his job to convince you that he's all those things. That's what an actor's job is, to convince the audience. Well, Professor Black Truth is giving Mr. Hanks thumbs down and giving his son, piece of Chet Hanks, 0 stars for his little performance. But it does give us an interesting view of how the perception of this virus changes as soon as you got some high-profile white folks who get it, especially in Hollywood. Just out of curiosity, though, if this had been, say, I don't know, if this had been John Boyega with no doubt some white girlfriend who had come down with this, been diagnosed with it, I wonder if we'd be having the same outpouring of support. Hell, if it was Denzel Washington, would we be getting the same outpouring of support? No, this is definitely different because you see, the country always seems to have double standards and triple standards as soon as we move into the realm of something that affects white people. The Haitians have been turned back at the edge of Florida for decades now, and just a matter of, it doesn't matter that they're not bringing any tropical diseases. The Haitians have never brought any sort of coronavirus or any other sort of virus for that matter. And yet this country treats them like they got the plague. Meanwhile, you got the United States bending over backwards to give all sorts of V1 visas to people from Asia, the Chinese investors, make sure that they put them on the fast track for citizenship. So yeah, you're sitting here giving these guys special treatment as far as visas go because China, being cash fluid now, you go ahead and open the doors for them. And now it's a matter of, well, we're not taking responsibility, though, for any of that. Over the course of the last 36 to 48 hours or so, there happens to have been a small tsunami of articles online and posts and such talking to people about the top rated Chinese restaurants in your town, or you can find listings that suddenly have actually started popping up in the Google search engine. The algorithm must have been tweaked, because now you got some posts that ordinarily ain't been shown up for the longest time, and all of a sudden we have articles popping up from a couple of years back that seem to show up as if they had just been posted today, which tells you that's an algorithmic thing. You got something about the top Chinese restaurants in all 50 states. Now, I would like to know, at what point has anyone ever decided to start pushing articles about the top soul food restaurants in Seattle? See, the Seattle Post-Intelligencer, they wanted to make sure just today, they posted an article about the 10 top-rated Chinese restaurants in Seattle's International District. They actually did that. I'm not making that up. They posted that today. At a time when the headlines are all reading that people are staying away from the Chinese restaurants. The Chinese restaurants are empty. And you got the Seattle Post-Intelligencer, who is giving what almost feels like a paid advertisement, almost because of how blatant it is, how out of place it is. Either this was a paid advertisement or it was somebody with an absolutely wicked sense of humor. But in either case, this whole coronavirus outbreak is giving a real reminder to people, especially black folks, about how white supremacy can hold two seemingly contradictory positions that actually drive in the same direction. White supremacy can simultaneously uphold that this disease that came out of China, ooh, we're wagging our fingers at China, you Chinese, you guys need to clean up your act. It can simultaneously do that while at the same time domestically continue to give preferential treatment to those who have traditionally gotten a pat on the head and been otherwise honorary Europeans. White supremacy can do both. White supremacy can simultaneously allow Asian immigrants into the country and at the same time also be able to look at the Chinese government and try to undermine it and try to otherwise stonewall and block it. It can do both. because the treatment of Asians within the borders of the United States happens to be part of the racial pecking order. So that the Asians are not the ones who run the yard in the United States. They run the yard in China, as you would expect, but not in the United States. So that being the case, white supremacy has the ability to be able to do this fake, phony, solicitous, sympathetic ploy, which is basically a matter of reinforcing that, hey, even if you got these folk who their home country is responsible for spreading a global pandemic, we're still inside the United States. We're going to maintain that, heck, even global pandemic or no, we're still going to be regarding them higher than we do black people. It's just like after September 11th. There was a poll that was released after the September 11th attacks, and they were basically mostly asking white people how they were regarding people of different ethnicities, and the response was still that they disliked black people more than they did Arabs. So what does that tell you? Now, the white media line about Tom Hanks and his white wife happens to be that, well, the fact that this Hollywood actor, one of the most beloved actors in modern cinema, he contracting this disease, well, they don't use disease, virus, him catching the bug. Well, this changes the perception of it. This is challenging the perception of the coronavirus. Changing perception. Yeah, changing perception now, ain't it? Yeah, for select groups. White supremacy has the ability to arbitrarily decide. The way that coronavirus is perceived is going to be very different for some groups than others. It's the same way that HIV and AIDS is perceived very differently in the white community than it is in the black one. Both groups can have AIDS, but one group, it's a matter of, well, it's a moral failing on your part, or it's otherwise, it's just the way you people are, and oh, you've got a disproportionate amount of it, even though that's a matter of baking the stats 5 ways from Sunday, and in the other case, it's a public health issue, and we can't be judgmental, and the only thing that matters is a cure and treatment and sympathy, and these are human beings too, blah, 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 blah. That's what white supremacy is doing. It's programming. Sure, this thing's going to burn like wildfire for a little while. But in the meanwhile, don't forget, even if if somebody from the dominant society happens to have this virus, well, this is a matter of we got to change the way that it's perceived. Don't forget that these are human beings now. Yeah, these are human beings. Because the white media has been low-key trying to push the line that, well, we don't want a stigma associated with this virus. Well, what the hell does that mean? So far, there hasn't been a stigma. Sure, this thing has been used for the sake of the white supremacists shaking their fists at the people who thought that they were honorary Europeans. Yeah, the Chinese have had to come in for some abuse, and some of the ones at home are finding that the people who previously frequented their restaurants ain't showing up for jack. But this whole canard about how, well, there's a stigma associated with it. Stigma how? By and large, the Americans who have been getting this virus have been white in the main. I mean, almost exclusively. You can count on one hand and still have enough fingers left to drive the alleged black people who have gotten this virus, who have allegedly gotten it. But this has been overwhelmingly a white virus so far. And that being the case, there's been mostly white people who've been getting on those cruise ships. Ain't no black folks been getting it. And as far as the individuals in these nursing homes in Seattle, we're talking about one of the most racially homogeneous cities in America, definitely hostile as hell towards blacks. That being the case, these are white folks who have been, by and large, white Americans. As far as Americans who have been getting it, it's been white people. And there's been no stigma for them. I just got through covering for you how you had this one cruise ship that's been allowed to dock in Oakland and the people have been getting off the ship. Nobody's been talking about, well, for the sake of the public and safety, we've got to have you guys held on the ship. Now, since we're just going to go ahead and assume that all you bastards have gotten it, and you'll have access to the pool, and we hear that there's a nice dining area. Why, it's almost as if you're in a hotel now, isn't it? But you better not get off that ship. Gee, just out of curiosity, if this was a boatload of black folks, who were on a ship that had just pulled into harbor off the coast of California, I'm sure they would have had all those black folks off the ship too, right? They wouldn't have said, well, as a matter of for the sake of national security, for the sake of public safety, we got to have these folks we have to have them in protective custody. And if any of them get out of line, we might have to plug a few of them. Now you know. So no, there is no stigma with this particular virus, no stigma at all, because there hasn't been a penalty or price to be paid. I covered for you on Twitter how you had this man whose older daughter had been diagnosed with this virus, and then he decides to take his younger daughter, him and his younger daughter decide to go to a school dance. This guy decides to take his younger daughter to a school dance after his older daughter was diagnosed with the virus. And then afterwards, he tries the old white supremacist favorite excuse, why, I didn't know. I didn't know at all. Sure, the white supremacists never seem to know anything, do they? And by the way, I also covered for you in that story about the father who decided to take his little virus to the school dance. There were people who were angry about it because just being in the room with somebody who's got coronavirus can expose you to it. And yet, as I pointed out, every single opportunity that can be made to make sure that people from the dominant society are immune from the law is taken. Now, you know, there are laws regarding exposing people to dangerous diseases. If you got a disease and you expose other people to it, you can be put in prison for that. You can be locked up for that. And if these were some black folks from the South Side of Chicago, if this was a black father from Detroit or D.C., I have no doubt that you would have already had the sheriff and the DA arresting this guy, and they would be on the nightly news parading him around in handcuffs, letting everybody know we take this very seriously, and there is zero tolerance, and this disease is lethal, and anyone who's doing this, we're getting serious about this. They would use him as an example. But since the father in this case had the complexion for the protection, nobody even brought up that idea. Nobody in law enforcement was willing to even float that idea, because as far as they were concerned, this is a disease. This is a virus that is affecting overwhelmingly white people in the United States. It's mostly white people who have it. And just like with meth, the meth epidemic, we're going to treat this no matter how many people get it, no matter how recklessly they spread it, no matter how carelessly that they pass this disease around. We're going to be treating it as a public health concern, and we will not even tolerate a conversation to the contrary. Just like meth is a racially protected drug, it is a racially protected narcotic. Coronavirus inside the United States is now a racially protected pathogen. Oh, sure, there'll be much hand-wringing and there'll be wailing and gnashing of teeth regarding, oh, how careless so-and-so, but nobody's going to be saying, hey, those laws regarding the deliberate spreading of diseases, yeah, we know that usually is in regards to sexually transmitted illnesses, but you know what? The legal principle is still sound, and you better believe if this was black folks who they thought they could jam up for it, then what would happen is you'd have the DAs running with it, and you have the courts upholding it. The white media could give less than a damn about Tom Hanks. Any suitably noteworthy or notable white celebrity would have done. But the fact that it's Tom Hanks in particular, as far as they're concerned, this is a particular jewel that fell in their laps. The idea here is to use Tom Hanks and his wife, by the way. They make sure to... Hey, how many of you even knew that Tom Hanks had a wife? How many of you even cared? Well, the white media wants to make sure you don't forget. So you have Tom Hanks and his wife being used as a proxy. They're being used as a proxy for the dominant society writ large. And it's just a reminder that no matter how many people get this, you are not to stigmatize them. Yeah, sure. We don't have any Negroes who can parade in front of the cameras, so we don't have... There have been some white media outlets who have tried to dance around that. They've been trying to figure out how to basically make this into some of, oh, this affects every single one of us. Well, when it comes to certain sorts of health conditions and disease, they always make sure to try to say something along the lines of black people, especially black men, are much more susceptible and much more likely to get leukemia, more likely to get heart disease, more likely to get this, that, and the third. Well, it affects everyone, but it affects black people more. Okay, now we're talking about the freaking coronavirus here. We don't say it affects white people more. Like Lou Gehrig's disease. Like that ice bucket challenge, whatever the hell whatever disease that was for. I'll be here too doggone long trying to look up all the diseases that the dominant society has most of. But the point is, it's never racially pathologized whenever it's dealing with Caucasians. We talk about black people. If they find a way to shoehorn that in there, if they can find a way to just force that in there, just say it. It doesn't matter if it's out of place or not. Just get it into the conversation. Get it on the record. Make sure you say it. So that's what's going on here. This is about making sure that they keep everybody on code. And the code is that you want to be careful dealing with China. Bad things come out of China, You're trying to do business with China. Oh, you want to have that Huawei system for your 5G network? Well, you better be careful. It came from China, Ain't no telling. After all, coronavirus can exist on plastic components for several hours. Oh, and as for Asians in the United States, oh, they're fine. Nothing wrong with them. Though their businesses are in some trouble. But you know what, folks? We want to be careful now. We do not want the Asians to be reduced to the economic level of the Negroes here. So just keep in mind, we don't want to get too carried away. There is a racial pecking order in this country, and we got to make sure that's maintained. And just in case people don't come right back to the restaurants, that's okay. The Chinese restaurants will be fine because there's already people in Congress who are deciding that they're going to be championing all sorts of economic aid for these individuals in these places. See, there was no championing of economic aid for black folks at any point in this country's history. After Hurricane Katrina, you would find more polar bears in New Orleans than you would black people who had actually benefited from the TARP program. The idea was to try to racially cleanse New Orleans of black folks, and it was simply the tenacity of the black residents themselves that maintained New Orleans demographics. But it damn sure wasn't because of W or FEMA. Nobody was trying to figure out how to do something that would help black folks. But now you got this virus that has been hitting Asian businesses particularly hard because people associate them with this virus. And now all of a sudden, we need to bring in rafts of economic support. See, whenever they try to tell you that they don't have money for reparations, there's your reparations right there. That's what happened to the reparations money. Whenever they try to tell you that you shouldn't be expecting something specifically for you, you think I'm going to do something that only benefits black people? No! You see, that's what they tell you. They tell you they ain't got it. Or in the case of Kamala Harris, they tell you we're not going to do it. Oh, the money's there. Sure. We got plenty of money. We got more than why we are awash in cash. Our pockets are bursting and overflowing, but not for you. There's a policy in place, and the policy is black people are to get nothing. That's the policy. Why is it that the coronavirus is not affecting the black community either in the United States or internationally the way that it is these other groups? Mainly because black people happen to be very, very fastidious when it comes to our hygiene. Black people have to be very careful about those things. There's a reason why you have never had Ebola just taking over all of freaking Africa. And when you look at AIDS, you got to start asking some serious questions about that. How the hell is it that you don't have these other diseases running wild all over Africa, but AIDS in particular does? Just saying. But black folks believe in covering our mouths if we cough. We also believe in washing our hands frequently. Black folks are not running around with freaking herds of cats around the house. And sure, a dog may be a pet, but it's never considered a member of the family. Sorry, but Fido doesn't get that kind of consideration. And it's a matter of with black folks, we actually do the things that doctors say you're supposed to be doing. We actually make sure to wash our hands. If they say that you should make sure to keep some sort of hand sanitizer with you, make sure to wipe down certain things and such, we do those things. Black folks are actually very careful. We are very, very careful when it comes to hygiene, when it comes to cleanliness. We're very careful about that. You got somebody coughing, on the other hand. I mean, who the world would have a cavalier attitude about spreading germs around except for somebody who has never been made to pay any sort of penalty, not a social penalty. They do not have anybody who checks them. They do not have anybody who makes sure that they are exposed to consequences. There is no price to be paid. If you got a group of people who are shielded from for the consequences of their actions, even to the point of no criticism is allowed of them, then what's going to happen is when a disease shows up, they're not going to suddenly say, "Oh, we better get on our P's and Q's." Instead, it's going to be, "Oh, come on. It's just a virus, not as bad as all that. Hey, it's not like it's the Spanish flu." And it's going to be you're blowing things out of proportion. I got sick and tired of being in my room. These kind of childish excuses for a lethal disease. But then again, the childish excuses never get questioned, never get called out. Nobody ever decides that certain demographics in the country are going to be pathologized. So whenever one of them is caught doing wrong, it's never held up as, where were the fathers in this community? Yeah, we know there's a lot of school shootings, but where are the fathers at? What's that old saying? Practice doesn't make perfect, practice makes permanent. Well, when the practice has been immunity from law based on skin color, a media that takes any sort of wrongdoing by a certain demographic and decides to whitewash it and breaks out the sad violin and tries to always make it sympathetic instead of deciding that maybe there are things that are wrong in and of themselves and need to be called out regardless. When you have this kind of double standard that goes on, when the disease shows up, well, the practice is going to be, I know I'm not going to get in trouble with the law. Nobody's actually going to check me and nobody's going to call me out on it because, well, I'm immune from it because when I do it, it's not as bad as all that. This is the cost of a white supremacist culture that has decided to exempt itself from any and all accountability and responsibility. Under white supremacy, you have a system of absolute immunity from accountability and responsibility. Accountability meaning you got somebody who you answer to. Responsibility meaning that you have duties and obligations. When you get to live without duty or without obligation of any sort, no matter what you do, and when you are not accountable, you ain't got to answer to anybody and nobody can make you answer to them, then what happens is, of course, you're going to get carelessness writ large. Of course, you're going to. You can't have any other result. It would be a miracle if you got any other result. When people are allowed to do whatever the hell that they want to do seemingly without consequence, then the natural, predictable, inescapable result is going to be utter and complete carelessness. It's going to be destruction because you do not get anything constructive or progressive from having no boundaries, from having no parameters, and from having no one who you actually have to answer to. There's no accountability. Then what happens is it doesn't matter if you do something or don't do something. And human nature being what it is, if people can get away with doing the bare minimum, that's exactly what they'll do. They'll do the bare minimum. Hell, they'll do nothing at all if they think that nobody's going to actually smack them upside the head. They'll do absolutely nothing at all. And that's what's happening here. That is precisely what's happening here. You've actually had people who had the nerve to say that Tom Hanks is some sort of hero. First of all, he ain't no damn hero. He didn't rescue a baby from a burning building. He got a freaking virus. That doesn't make you a hero. There's a bunch of folks. If you're looking for white people who you can put on a pedestal, there's a lot of them on these cruise ships. They got viruses too. Tom Hanks is not the first person to be on TV. There's like some couple out of Britain. These guys have been on television for the last couple of weeks. They were on that Princess cruise liner in Japan. So Tom Hanks is not the first person or even the first white person who's gotten this virus. He ain't the first person or even the first white person who has gone on camera about it. How he becomes a hero is beyond me, but it just goes to show how low the bar for heroism is under white supremacy. The guy is a freaking actor, okay? With actors, whenever you get to say that you got some sort of disease or disorder or what have you, that makes your stock go up in Hollywood. Those are bragging rights in Hollywood. Because in Hollywood, you're used to being in an industry that's all artifice, that's completely and thoroughly fake and phony and artificial. It's all smoke and mirrors. Nothing is real. The words on the page aren't real. The people speaking the words aren't real. The situations are not real. The only thing real is the money, and hell, they go through that like so much Monopoly paper. They are completely and thoroughly detached from society, detached from reality. They live in their own private gated communities. They got private security. They go to exclusive parties. They have exclusive meetings. They're treated differently than everybody else on the planet. Oh, you breathe some pretty rarefied air when you happen to be in Hollywood. But what they also understand is that for them, the adventure is not the cloistered, secluded lives that they've made for themselves. For them, the real adventure is when they're down in the muck with the plebes, especially the black folks. That's how they show, see, I can handle real life. I am an adventurer. To them, that's courage. That's bravery for them. That's an adventure for them. That proves that they got some real character. Because most of the people in Hollywood would not even deign to do such a thing. So that's how you get bragging rights for yourself in Tinseltown. That's how you do it. You go ahead and let them know, see, everything in our business is fake, but my life is real. Well, at least the disease that I got or the illness that I'm dealing with or what have you, that's real. So please don't read more into Tom Hanks's little announcement than is actually there. And don't read more into the white media's reaction than is actually going on. This is the whitewashing of the coronavirus. That's all that you're seeing here. This is the whitewashing of the virus. They are now emblazoning it that the same way that Me Too was associated with the glitz and glamour of Hollywood actresses, well, to an extent, there is now going to be a certain amount of leeway given to certain people that why, if you got the coronavirus, you got something in common with Tom Hanks. Well, Tom Hanks has got diabetes too, by the way. I just think that perhaps that's something else that people might want to be aware of when you're talking about people who are most at risk for some sort of serious consequences from having the coronavirus. If you got people who are older, like Tom Hanks, and people who might have certain pre-existing conditions, especially when it comes to their immune system. So family, I want you guys to stay alert out there. Stay safe, okay? This disease, by and large, is leaving the vast majority of black folks untouched. And that being the case, I'm not looking at this so much as the coronavirus as much as the karma virus. And I don't expect the dominant society or their wannabes, the aspiring members of the dominant society, to learn anything from this. They haven't learned anything from the prior incidents the prior lessons of history. I don't think that this is going to make any particular impression on them, but it is a matter of, even if it doesn't change them, the point of the matter is it is nonetheless exacting some consequences. I think that this is not something that just fell out of the blue. I think that this is karma coming to call. And I think that so long as those who have been abusing and attacking and denigrating and mistreating the original man and the original woman, as long as they continue doing so, I think that the earth is going to continue sending these maladies. I think the earth is going to continue doing this as a way of letting them know, hey, you cannot treat the original man and original woman like this on a planet that has known them a lot longer than it's known you. But this whole pandemic that's broken out, very interesting. Because it's a pandemic that seems to be exacting the harshest toll, especially on certain demographics who have decided that there are certain things that they don't do. You see, when kids are in school, especially when I was in school back in the day, you would have the people from the hospitals who would come by and they would check the kids in the school for head lice. I'm sure maybe they probably still do it today. I imagine that they do. But the thing that got me about it was they would say that basically African American children, they were the least likely to have head lice. And it was a matter of they tried to claim that black people's hair was the reason for it. The texture of our hair. We got curly hair, and well, the lice don't like curly hair. Now, of course, this is not true at all because there were probably about one, maybe two black kids who might have head lice for a number of reasons. But they were like, if it's going to be somebody's going to be overwhelmingly, it's going to be the Caucasian or the Asian kids or what have you, people with straighter hair. But they didn't want to say what the real reason was. I guess because as far as they were concerned, they were not about to besmirch or otherwise stigmatize cultural practices of the dominant society. The reason that head lice was so prevalent among the Caucasian kids is because they were the most likely to be using their dog as, say, a pillow whenever they would be watching television. They have their head leaning on the dog, and the dog's got lice and fleas and such, and that's how it transfers from the dog to a person. Black kids do not do that. In black households, you don't use Fido for a pillow for any reason. So because of the peculiar cultural practice of deciding that the dog is going to be with us at all times, and oh, we must have our heads as close to the dog as possible, closer in fact, why Fido makes a good pillow, oh, he likes that. And then you wonder why it is that you got a bunch of head lice running around. It's because of a particular practice. Why is it that the particular viruses spread faster in some groups than others? And it's because there are some people who don't believe, especially in wintertime, in doing the things you're supposed to do to be considerate of other people. I guess, though, when you've never had to be considerate, it doesn't come easy to you. Well, now you got a virus on the loose that is punishing those particular practices. If you do what you're supposed to do, be considerate of your fellow man. If you decide that you're going to be accountable and responsible, I answer to the people around me for what it is that I do. So I can't be taking my daughter to the dance if my other daughter has gotten sick. Hey, if I got a cough, I cover my mouth. I make sure to wash my hands. I keep the hand sanitizer on standby. I don't just sit here coughing with my mouth wide open or sneezing with no consideration whatsoever. When you do these things, that's how you spread this stuff. And it's a matter of, okay, I don't have to answer to the people around me. So I'm going to choose to be responsible. I'm going to choose to be considerate. I'm going to choose to act as if I'm not the only person in this world.